There were several special places that the Italian community used to like to frequent on Harrison Street. Probably the most colorful restaurant on the street was called Nicky D's restaurant. It was owned by a very colorful man. His name was Nicky DeFrancesco. He was the owner along with his wife, and he was a great cook and also had a great restaurant business, plus at that time period a tavern. And the enjoyable point about Nicky D's was that everybody seemed to know each other. And I'm certain some of you probably have watched the television show called Cheers. Well, Nicky D's was our Cheers on Harrison Street many, many years before this TV show became popular, because everybody liked to go down to Nicky's. And there were several reasons for it. First of all, Nicky was quite a unique individual himself, as I mentioned. Very colorful, very outgoing, very excellent cook. He started the restaurant back in the early 50s. It was a restaurant that was owned by his uncle, D.D., Dominic Capoletti, and his wife, Marietta. And they decided to move from Harrison Street with their restaurant to go over to Michigan Avenue and set up the Northside Cappy's restaurant. So Nicky, in turn, bought this restaurant and kept the menus primarily Italian. He had probably the best pizza in town, one of the earliest makers of pizza in Elkhart. Very good pizza. He had good Italian food, primarily specialties like spaghetti, pastas, and various, but he specialized in unique type foods. So like he would make a special sandwich. He's the one that developed the sausage sandwich in Elkhart. For example, he made egg and pepper sandwiches, and he used to make special like a salami and cheese sandwich that you didn't hear very often. Then he made soups every day. He made a different soup every day. And he made one that was almost uniquely popular throughout the community called garbage soup. And everybody used to come down and ask Nicky what went into that soup. And Nicky would say, well, it was all I had left over in the refrigerator. I just threw it in and made soup. And he says, if you like it, fine. If you don't worry about it. So it became so popular, everybody wanted to know when Nicky was going to make garbage soup, which was usually first part of the week. So that was probably one of his most unique meals. And basically it was a vegetable soup in itself with small section, maybe a little piece of beef or something in there, but primarily different vegetables. Beans, potatoes, Italians always used to use tomatoes. He'd put in maybe some carrot and some celery, once in a while some different types of beans, and everybody just loved it. One of his specialties also was American fried potatoes. And Nicky could really make a nice American fried potato, and people used to come in for his sausage sandwiches, American fried potatoes, and he had a very unique Italian salad. So that was kind of a quick menu, and most people that came from all over, not just Elkhart, but then the restaurant got to be so popular, people from other areas started to come to visit Nicky's. And he had kind of a unique following. And the people that actually worked in the restaurant also blended in. I had my brother, Hammer, as he was called, Patsy Manichello, worked there as a bartender for about 25 years. And he and Nicky were kind of a colorful couple, you might say, like the odd couple. And they used to argue and fight and have a good time. And when people come into the restaurant, they used to come in, I think, just because of the fact that Nicky and Hammer would be jousting back and forth at each other about various things. And Hammer would want to keep Nicky in the kitchen. Nicky'd want to tell Hammer to get out of his kitchen. He wanted to go up there and run the bar and don't bother with his kitchen. So everybody got a kick out of that. And the restaurant was very quaint, very small in size, maybe 40, 50, 60 people. Had a nice bar. I can remember I worked at Nicky D's on weekends for a few years myself, and just about everybody in the neighborhood would come in and pitch in and help at one time or another. Some of the other fellas, like I can remember Mike Dandino before he started his restaurant. He worked down there for a while. Michael's, Ivan Ilio, he worked down there before he started Michael's restaurant. So they learned from Nicky about cooking. Johnny Varnelli, probably one of the fellas that stayed down there, was kind of a colorful guy too for quite a few years, was Mike Palumbo. We used to call him the plumber. And Mike was kind of a character too, and he and Hammer used to run the bar. One worked days, one worked nights. And there were several people that just came in and helped out. I mean, a lot of different families on Harrison Street came in and worked. And it was just a neat meeting place. And for example, Nicky would wear a bandana. He looked like an Indian. When he wore that bandana, he'd work his tail off in that kitchen, and he'd come out and look at somebody and get a big old scrawl on his face. And he didn't know what he was going to tell you, what he was going to say. And Hammer, he always had a cigar in his mouth. He was about 6'3", quite a bit bigger than most Italian Americans, weighed about 225 pounds, and he could look at you and you think you could be very afraid of the person, but they were both very warm, and once you got to know them, they were very, very good friends of yours. A good example of Nicky's, he liked to keep that bar for men only. He didn't like the ladies sitting at that bar. And when the state law changed and they decided that the ladies could sit at the bar, Nicky got a little bit aggravated about that. He was a man's man. So he'd tell the ladies when they're up the bar, he says, "What's the matter? Doesn't your stove work at home?" He said, "Why the hell don't you go home and cook?" He said, "I got enough people in here bothering me, so I don't need you in here." And the ladies just laughed and they chuckled about it. And the more this conversation went on, the more the people came down and wanted to visit this unique place. Nick didn't have any sign on his building. I think originally when he started, he had a little sign that said Nicky D's. But then it burned out, so he took the damn thing down. He said, "I'm not going to have any sign up." So people would come in when I worked there with my brother, and they'd say, "Is this Nicky D's bar?" And Hammer would say, "Why? What do you want to know about it?" He said, "I heard it's got good food." He said, "Well, yeah, come on in. Sit down. We'll get you something to eat." Some of the most notable people in the community would come in and eat. I don't make any difference whether they be a head of, say, companies, sports figures, mayors, police chiefs. They all frequented Nicky's. And it was primarily because of the fun. And usually, several times during the week, a bunch of the guys would get together at the bar. And Nicky liked to gamble a little bit. So he would play some cards. Occasionally, they'd play ship captain and crew or various games, and the guys would play for drinks. And so everybody down there, and I mean, there wasn't an Italian American didn't frequent Nicky D's. And so that was the gathering point. That's why I think it was like Cheers, because you didn't have to go downtown, or you didn't have to go around. Everybody that came into Nicky's would tell you what's going on in the community. And so you knew all the so-called gossip. If it was going to go on, it was Nicky D had it first. So that was kind of unique. I can remember several times Nicky would make a certain meal, and then the people would want that meal all the time, and he'd tell me, "Go ahead and go and make that meal anymore." He was tired of making it. So they kept aggravating him about it. And some of the other fellas would, around the wintertime, old Kenny Sparrow and John Janzeric and Mike Palumbo, some guys, they'd throw firecrackers at Nicky in the kitchen and blow up, and he'd get mad at a hornet's nest and have him chase him out of the bar. Some of the other color fellows would come in, maybe they'd have just a little bit more to drink. Nicky didn't like that. So he'd chase him out, wouldn't let him back into the place. He ran a pretty strict ship, you might say. And my brother Hammer, he was just about the same as Nicky was, in a different fashion. People would come in and the tables would be all full, and people would be leaving because they turned their tables over quite often. And Hammer always had a bar rag, and he'd throw it at somebody. Say, "Hey, clean that damn table off if you're going to eat here." He said, "Clean that table off, put that stuff in the kitchen." He'd always give orders, you might say. He was just the opposite of Nicky. And he several times would, people would come in and say, "Gee, he's awful mean-looking man." But as they got to know Hammer, he was pretty warm, like Nicky D was. They're both quite unusual characters, as we would say. And some of the people would bring sports figures in. So, for example, the Chicago Bear football team that Roy Beck brought in. Roy was a businessman in the steel business, and he'd bring in some of the coaches like Abe Gibran, and was coaching the Bears at the time, Ed Obradovich, Mike Ditka. He'd bring in Mike Pyle was playing back in those days. They'd come in and eat, boy, but could those boys eat? And they'd have a good time. And they said that food was as good as they would get in Chicago. And Nicky felt pretty good about that. Then Ralph Montagano Sr. brought in Joe Louis, who was, outside of Rocky Marciano, was the most popular boxer we ever knew. And Joe Louis came in there, and he was just a friendly man, and he got a special meal from Nicky, and we sat down and chatted with him. But those were the type of people who would want to come into Nicky's, and just to see, because they had heard all about it. And it was just a unique restaurant. When it ended, Nicky got sick in 1985, I think it was, 1995, and he was 64 years old, died of a brain tumor. And then my brother Hammer went to work some other place, so that kind of died out. But for those, from say the early 1950s up until the late 70s, up to the 90s, that was quite the restaurant that everybody liked to go to. People would wait out in front, maybe for half a block to a block to try to get in there. And some would come from, like you see, different communities, whether it be from Michigan, or maybe some would come from southern Indiana, central Indiana. They heard about it when they were in town. They wanted to go eat there. And some of the business people would like to come in and eat there. And Nicky would harass them. I mean, it made make a difference who it was. It could have been the President of the United States. Nicky was going to harass him anyway, because that was his nature. And then Hammer would throw that bar towel at you, and he said, "Get busy cleaning that table." And my brother Hammer in the morning would come in at 8 o'clock and open the tavern up. And he'd have to peel the potatoes and get the soups going and make the sauce. So he had a crew, you might say, of retired Italian Americans used to come in there. And they peeled 100 pounds of potatoes. Now, Hammer didn't peel them all the time, but he got fellas like Mike Bibbo Sr., we used to call him Tricky. Charles Palmero Sr. used to call him Pammy. You got various people to come in, and Hammer would buy him a cup of coffee and maybe a little shot of brandy in their coffee, and he said, go clean that table off. Let's peel these potatoes. Let's get this stuff all done. And it became a regimentation. Everybody liked coming there because Hammer would give them orders. And maybe once in a while he'd fix them a little hamburger or something, but he'd get all that stuff done before Nicky came in about 11 o'clock. And Nicky would work with Hammer until about 5, and then on the weekend, Hammer would come back on Saturday evening. He'd work Saturday morning for a short while, and then come back and work Saturday night together. And so they really became a close-knit group. And one time, Nicky's wife was going to have a child. I can remember this vividly, their last child. And he was a nervous wreck anyway. And he told Hammer, he says, now when my wife calls, he says, you just let me know, and I got to get down there and have that, bring her to the hospital. And Hammer said, okay. Well, his wife called. He ran all the way down 2 or 3 blocks to his house on Harrison Street. He forgot that his car was up at the tavern. So Dad would run down to get his car. Then later that night, when he was at the hospital, everybody went up there with a case of beer because Nicky loved to drink his Schlitz. He'd drink a case of Schlitz beer a day like clockwork. And Hammer would drink his case of Falstaff a day like clockwork, and they'd just get along great. So they went up there and frequented it. Another time, Nicky was in the hospital, and our good friend, Dr. Bruce McCart, was our doctor. Everybody in the Italian neighborhood used Dr. Bruce. Well, Nicky was in there for an operation, and Ralph Montagano Sr., who we used to call Flytrap, he had a restaurant downtown, was in there at the same time. Well, everybody wanted to go up and see those guys. So Nicky asked Dr. Bruce, he said, Doc, he said, I can't go have any type of surgery or anything without having a couple of beers. He said, oh, you can put some beer in the refrigerator. So everybody kept bringing beer up to Nicky and Ralph at the place, and before you know it, there would be 10 or 12 people up there frequenting Nicky and Ralph's room, and they'd all be in there drinking and having a good time, and the nurses didn't know what to make of that. That was the kind of individual Nicky was at the time. And sometimes they would close up the restaurant on Saturday night early. I mean, the lights would go off, making a difference if people in there or not. He says, come on, get the hell out of here. We got to go downtown and get a drink. We're going to play golf tomorrow. So that's what we used to do. We'd close the bar up about 9:30, 10 o'clock, head downtown and get something to drink for. We went home. And the people just enjoyed it. I mean, they come in Nicky's on Saturday night knowing that Nicky was going to throw them out and lock the doors on them. He said, you got to get out of here. Start sweeping the floors. And so everybody used to come down there, and they just enjoyed themselves. I mean, everybody in the community. There wasn't anybody on Harrison Street that didn't go to Nicky's, besides having good food, good comradeship, but it was a meeting place. So that was a great place. And when it closed down, it looked like you lost part of our heritage right there in that restaurant. But it was good. It was good.